Hi. Someone wrote the following comment on one of my videos. I have witnessed God show up in my life on many occasions. He's protected me, shown his everlasting love, convicted and corrected me as a parent does a child, and came through for me at the last second when I needed him the most. Why? Because I put my faith in him instead of slandering him. We read or hear comments like this from time to time. For instance, you should thank God for waking you up this morning because apparently he killed some people in their sleep, and you should be glad it was the other people and not you. Or sometimes we hear, I wouldn't be alive today except for my grandmother's prayers. That one particularly intrigues me. Can you imagine? You're out doing something that's going to get you killed. Maybe you get drunk and you're fixing to walk out in front of a big truck. You're always watching, ready to make it happen. Because, he's the one who determines when and how you die, right? So he's got it all set up. It was decided before you were born. But then, suddenly, Yahweh's like, what's that? Oh, his grandma's praying. Shoot. Guess I'll have to change my mind on the number of that guy's days. Then he has some, maybe other guy show up, maybe a friend, just in the nick of time, and pull you back out of the street. This is the contradictory nature of not just the Bible, but the thinking of Christians. On the one hand, I won't die till it's my time. On the other hand, I wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for my grandma's prayers. They can't decide which it is. So it's whichever one that makes the point they're trying to prove at the time. People actually think that a magic man in the sky keeps them alive until he's ready to kill them. They think he causes them to receive money in the mail or whatever else happens to them that they think's good or makes them feel good. Bad things come from the devil, of course, but all good things come from Yahweh. Their God proves himself over and over to them, they proclaim. Yes, when good things happen, it's all Jesus. You make a good grade or get a promotion at work, and it's because of Jesus. If you don't do well, that's your own fault because you didn't work hard enough. Sorry. So how do people recognize the good they receive from Yahweh or Jesus? Do these gods tell them they're the ones blessing them, or do people just assume it? Well, let me tell you a little story. It's actually a true story, or at least it was told as a true story. I mean, it's in the Bible after all. But first, a little background. The Hebrew people mentioned in the Bible don't worship Yahweh exclusively. They were constantly serving other gods, which, of course, really irritated Yahweh because he was, as he said himself, a jealous God. In fact, he said his very name was jealous. He fought with the other gods constantly and was always angry. Once he claimed that he was going to judge the gods of Egypt. Sure, when it's the gods of Egypt, you don't think much about it. But what if Yahweh had said that he was going to execute judgments on Thor or Loki? How ridiculous would that be? It'd be like King Charles of England threatening to attack Bran, Lord of Winterfell, from Game of Thrones. And that's exactly how it was with Yahweh and the gods he fought. Either these gods were as real as Yahweh, or he was just off his rocker. Here's the verse, Exodus 12:12. For I will go through the land of Egypt in that night, and will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and animal, against all the gods of Egypt. I will execute judgments. I am Yahweh. Yahweh was having one big old conniption fit. He was hopping mad, it seems. He was going to punish even animals and little children for what a Pharaoh had done. Because naturally he punishes the innocent along with the guilty. I mean, why not? And of course, the Pharaoh did what he did only because Yahweh had hardened his heart in the first place. But this article, or this video, is not about that fateful night, horrible as it was. I point it out as an example. It's a good one showing the evil behavior Yahweh is capable of. But more importantly, it shows that if the Bible is true, these people of his ought to have seen who he was, and thus how powerful and cruel he was. They should have been afraid, far too afraid to worship other gods. But for some reason they weren't, and that brings me to the story. This tale I want to talk about is from Jeremiah 44. It's a beautiful story in a way, because the people stood up for themselves. They heard what Yahweh had planned for them, but bravely refused to kowtow to him. Jeremiah got a message from Yahweh, who was angry at the Jews living in Egypt. He said they had provoked him to anger, not because they had murdered babies or treated one another despicably or anything like that. No, they burnt incense too and served other gods. Yahweh said he got up early in the morning. I didn't know he went to bed and slept, did you? He got up early in the morning and sent out his prophets saying, "Do not this abominable thing that I hate." But the people didn't listen and wouldn't turn from burning incense to other gods. And Yahweh called that wickedness. That's pretty much always what was upset about. He wasn't receiving his due. Of course, the people didn't listen. And of course, Yahweh's wrath was kindled, and he reminded them of how he'd poured out his wrath and anger on the cities of Judah and the streets of Jerusalem and said these cities were wasted and desolate. So Yahweh threatened to cut off man, woman, infant, and suckling out of the midst of Judah, to leave them nobody remaining. He kept bringing up that burning of incense. That really made him mad. He said he was going to cut these people off and make them a curse and reproach among all nations of the earth. He reminded them of all the wickedness they had committed and yammered on about his disgust that they hadn't humbled themselves before him. So what was he going to do? Well, he said he was going to set his face against them, and again said that he'd cut off all of Judah. He said he'd take the remnant of Judah down in Egypt, and they'd all be consumed, from the least to the greatest, by famine and sword. They'd be an object of horror and astonishment and a curse and reproach. Nobody would escape, he declared. Now, as I said, those people supposedly knew what Yahweh was capable of. They knew he was merciless and despicable, but what did they boldly declare to Jeremiah? Let's take a look. Jeremiah 44, 15 through 17. Then all the men who knew that their wives burned incense to other gods, and all the women who stood by, a great assembly, even all the people who lived in the land of Egypt, in Pathros, answered Jeremiah, saying, "As for the word that you have spoken to us in the name of Yahweh, we will not listen to you, but we will certainly perform every word that is gone forth out of our mouth, to burn incense to the Queen of the sky, and to pour out drink offerings to her, as we have done, we and our fathers, our kings, and our princes in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem." Whoa. That's bravery right there, my friends. I mean, if indeed these people actually knew Yahweh, rather than just hearing stories like we do, then I'm shocked they'd have the audacity to respond. The audacity to respond this way. Aren't you? Kind of makes you wonder how true all the stories in the Bible are, doesn't it? But listen to this. All you who proclaim that you know your God answers your prayers and does such and such for you. Verse 17 of Jeremiah 44 continues to say, "For then, when they worshiped the Queen of the sky, had we plenty of food and were well and saw no evil." Imagine that. These people had it great when they worshiped the Queen of the sky, or as the King James Version says, the Queen of heaven. Now this, I believe, was Ashtoreth, or you might know her as Ishtar, Astarte, Inanna, Aphrodite, or Venus. Also Hera, Isis, and Juno wore this title. But let's continue. Verse 18. "But since we left off burning incense to the Queen of the sky and pouring out drink offerings to her, we have wanted all things and have been consumed by the sword and by the famine." Shock of all shocks. They worshipped Yahweh and times were horrible, but they worshipped a goddess and life was better. How is that possible, y'all? You know what this means? It means that Ashtoreth is a real goddess, right? It surely must mean that. I mean, what else could it mean? It's what it means when Yahweh's good to you, right? At least you say it's what it means and expect the rest of us to believe you. By the way, here's another little bit of information on this. Remember the Moabite god Shemesh? I've mentioned him before in some other videos. Judges 11:24, inspired to go in your book by your God Yahweh, states that Shemesh gave the Moabites the land and other possessions that they had, the same as Yahweh gave Israel what they had. The people who said this, by the way, are the people who wrote the document it's contained in. Hence, not only did they believe in the Queen of Heaven, but they also believed in Shemesh. Now, this all makes sense, of course, since Yahweh was simply the God of Israel, while other nations had their own gods. Yahweh inherited Israel when the Most High God, El Elyon, divided up the world among his children. Deuteronomy 32:8-9 states, now this is from the New Jerusalem Bible, 1985, when the Most High, Elyon, gave the nations each their heritage, when he partitioned out the human race, he assigned the boundaries of nations according to the number of the children of God. But Yahweh's portion was his people. Jacob was to be the measure of his inheritance. Apparently Shemesh got Moab when this dividing up of the human race happened, when Elyon gave his children nations. And Shemesh gave Moab good possessions, as the Bible states. He took care of his people. So the problem here seems to be that Israel wasn't content to be Yahweh's property exclusively. They went rogue and worshipped gods belonging to other nations. And that wasn't going to fly with Yahweh. Anyway, Yahweh started cussing up a storm at this point in the story. He said he had sworn by his great name, saying, as the Lord Yahweh lives, that his name would no more be named in the mouth of any man of Judah in all the land of Egypt. And from then on, he said, he'd be watching over these people for evil and not for good. Well, Yahweh, buddy, sounds to me like that's what you've been doing all along, since they've been consumed by the sword and the famine when they left off serving the Queen of the Sky. So nothing new, huh? As we know, Yahweh is not one to love his enemies and do good to them, as Jesus lied and said he does. No, he punishes his enemies and does evil toward them, as he says he will do here. Shoot, he punishes the innocent, as we've seen in this story. Yahweh also said again that he was going to make an end of these people, but not really. No, after saying he'd make an end of them, and that none would escape, he contradicted himself and said that some would escape and return to Judah, but only a few. Now, do you understand that? I mean, it's like how only a few of us will be saved from his wrath when all is said and done. Now, again, although if one is to believe the Bible, these people saw Yahweh's wrath over and over. Apparently it was, as I suggested, exactly the way we supposedly see it. You know, like when a tsunami hits a place and Christians think it's Yahweh doing it, or someone shoots up a gay bar and it's always Yahweh's judgment. The truth is, of course, that the ancient Hebrews obviously didn't know, nor do people today know, anything about what any God who might exist does. Because no matter which God anybody serves, the results are always circumstantial and coincidental. Remember how the Hebrews here said that when they quit serving Ashtoreth, things went wrong for them? You might say Yahweh was punishing them, but why then? Once they stopped, why punish them then? Why didn't he do it while they were worshiping the queen? That would have made more sense. But, oh wait, he probably hadn't yet got wind that they were worshiping her. Takes time for news to travel all the way up to him. Then he has to come down and find out whether the rumors are true. And then, as he said himself, if not, I will know. No, dear commenter, you haven't seen your God or any God show up on any occasion at all. He hasn't protected you. He hasn't shown you any love. He hasn't convicted or corrected you. He hasn't come through for you at the last second or any second at all. In fact, as the Bible itself says, the race is not to the swift, battle is not to the strong, bread is not to the wise, riches are not to men of understanding, and favor is not to men of skill. So what do you think is responsible for winning at life? Now, you'd think it would be, as you say it is, following Yahweh and Jesus. It's how it was with the Queen of Heaven, right? And after all, Yahweh claimed that his people, if they obeyed him, they wouldn't get any of the diseases that he put on Egypt. He said the Israelites would be blessed in the city and blessed in the field. Their enemies would flee from them 7 ways, and they'd be plenteous in goods. Yahweh would open up good treasures, and the earth would receive rain, and they'd be the head and not the tail. And what did Jesus say? Well, he said his followers would have everything they asked for. Yes, he said they could ask what they willed. What they willed, not what Yahweh willed, and it would be given to them. He said they could move mountains and replant trees in the sea. He claimed they could drink poison and it wouldn't hurt them, and they could lay hands on sick people and heal them. But is that what Ecclesiastes says? Wins the battle and race or brings bread to the wise? No, not at all. It says the answer's time and chance. If you're in the right place at the right time, or you're just lucky, things work out for you. That's what the Bible says. Contradicts itself, but you know. Thus, you only think, as did those worshiping the Queen of Heaven, that good things come to you because you have that glorious faith you're so proud of. But, as the song says, it ain't necessarily so. It ain't necessarily so. The things that you're liable to read in the Bible, it ain't necessarily so. And this Hebrew personal story about Astarte or Aphrodite or whoever shows that your personal story proves nothing at all. Theirs proves nothing, right? I don't know why y'all keep repeating your anecdotes. Nobody but you believes them. And as we've seen, even the Bible says you're lying. The Queen of Heaven doesn't do diddly squat. Shemish doesn't do diddly squat. And Yahweh and Jesus, they don't do diddly squat. And you know why? They don't exist. And here's what's important to remember. Men wrote the documents contained in the Bible. And those men obviously thought all the gods they talked about were real. Shemish, the Queen of Heaven, Baal, Yam, Yahweh, they were all the same. The people who wrote about them believed in all of them. So how can you really trust that any of them, including Yahweh, really existed? You know that you can't. Thank you all. Bye.